Prepare to be captivated by the business story of the week, hosted by me, Shaheen Shan. Join us on a journey through the twists and turns of entrepreneurial triumphs and setbacks. Immerse yourself in the narrative and witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. This is Business Story of the Week.
And we are back. Welcome once again to Business Story of the Week. I am Joshua. I am your co-host. And today, like any other day, we navigate the world of business, innovation, entrepreneurship. We uncover stories of perseverance, struggles, and success. And today, it is all about persevering. And we have a leading voice when it comes to persevering through struggles, and a very, very important message. I feel that every time we have guests with the expertise in this kind of field, Dr. Laura Streffler is a respected therapist known for her compassionate and practical approach to counseling. She utilizes a blend of traditional and alternative methods tailored to each client's needs, specializing in areas such as relationships, trauma, and mental health disorders. With a career also dedicated to education and advocacy, she has taught at Hodges University and Florida Gulf Coast, and provides free seminars on critical. Sorry about that. Something popped up. Okay. I'll have her editor edit that out. With a career dedicated to education and advocacy, she taught at Hodges University and Florida Gulf Coast University, and frequently provides seminars on critical issues like domestic violence and sexual abuse. Dr. Laura, this is a very important message. I'd love to get into it, but first and foremost, how are you? You look lovely today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I love talking about the resilience of the human spirit.
Oh, well, that is exactly what we're going to get into today. And I really love this. I love the topic in the sense that it's very important. It's a very important message to put out there. And I speak, of course, for our audience and listeners as well, that it is something so important that it needs to be talked about more. And it's not talked about enough. It will never be talked about too much, so to speak, right? But I always want to ask, I always want to start it this way. I want to start it from the very beginning, right? I want to start where your journey into counseling began, like maybe from early childhood, during your education, perhaps personal experiences as well. Could you share to us what inspired you to pursue this career, and particularly specializing in the field of trauma? And is there anything that happened along the way that motivated you or pushed you in this direction?
Well, I was 30 before I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I never really thought about becoming a therapist until I pretty much was one. I grew up in a home. My dad committed suicide when I was 14. My mom struggled with mental illness, and then I got into an abusive relationship towards the end of college. And then when I was 27, I moved from Massachusetts to Florida with two suitcases and a $175 check that I happened to have in my wallet, and I started my life over. And at that point, I was in sales. My undergraduate degree is in media communications,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in advertising, and then I started subbing at a high school and volunteering in a domestic violence shelter. And the next thing I knew, I was in a master's counseling program.
Wow. So you started volunteering first, and then it
I
just sort
started
of kind of
volunteering.
happened. And
Yeah,
then you,
the universe
wow.
just puts you where you're
I
supposed to
was gonna
be.
say, it just feels like it was never intentional, so to speak, but then now it feels more intentional than ever, I imagine.
It's funny when
And
you said it's never intentional. What I heard, it was never intended. It was sorry. It was
go ahead.
never intended by me, but I guess it was intended by the universe because
Per-
I just ended up there. It's funny. I was subbing at the high school and
mhm,
going to graduate school, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to work with teenagers because I loved working with teenagers,
mhm,
or work in domestic violence. And for
mhm.
my master's program, I ended up writing a program for
Uh-huh.
teenagers arrested for domestic violence and their families, and I
Uh-huh.
facilitated that for 5 years. So
Wow, for 5 years.
I didn't know that I wanted to do that either, but there I was, and I've done in home for child abuse and neglect.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
You know,
Was
just
there a particular moment throughout that 5 years perhaps, or that kind of made you feel like or decided that okay, this is what I'm gonna do? Was it a particular moment, or was it more of a gradual thing?
well, I needed something to do for my internship, and I couldn't
Right.
decide if I wanted to. I was doing in home for child abuse and neglect, so kids
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to go into the system at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And my supervisor, her husband, worked at a substance abuse agencies that worked with the juvenile justice system.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up doing my internship with him, and as an internship, I wrote the program initially because I wanted to work with teenagers and
Right.
I knew about domestic violence, and it just kind of evolved.
Wow.
And
Well, that's
I
just.
was very blessed where I had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
success with the families and with the
Mm-hmm.
kids. And so I wanted to keep doing it. There's nothing more beautiful than seeing pain go away.
Precisely. It must have felt early on that, you were just interning, writing the program or creating the program, and then just seeing this result must have felt a lot of fulfillment, so to speak. Of course, you're helping people and you're helping them overcome these unimaginable trauma, so to speak. And I love how you used how it just evolved because, there's just like this evolution of to approaching these kind of therapies or these kinds of experiences, uh, these kinds of people, these individuals, what they felt. There needs to be like a multifaceted approach. I'd like you to kind of dig deep a little bit about your approach, so to speak. With your extensive experience, how have you seen therapeutic approaches evolve, and how are you in particular addressing trauma, and how do you integrate these into your practice?
Well, I see myself more as a healer than anything else. More, I've always seen
Mm-hmm.
myself as an emotional healer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think people really underestimate the honor and the power of somebody letting you into their pain.
That's
That's the
true.
most sacred experience there is, somebody letting you
That's
see
true.
them and feeling
Mm-hmm.
their pain. And I don't take
Mm-hmm.
that lightly. And for me,
Mm-hmm.
that honor is bigger than anything else on the planet,
Mm-hmm.
especially
Mm-hmm.
people that have been violated by people that they love, that love them, their family of origin.
Precisely.
The people that are supposed to protect them are the ones that are violating them, and yet
Mm-hmm.
they come to trust me. As far as
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned, there's no greater gift or honor.
That's a beautiful way to put it, Dr. Laura. I love how that you say that they are trusting you with something so, we're programmed, right? We're programmed to hide our pain. We're programmed to not like to be in defense because we don't it's there's a lot of shame surrounding that, especially if it was someone close to you that did that. It's an unimaginable pain for someone you trust to do that to you. And I love how you said that it's it's a sacred thing that they
Well,
share
it is
this.
a sacred thing, and you probably can't tell on the video, but I'm old, and I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this almost 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing this before the internet, before Facebook, before Me
Mm-hmm.
Too.
Mm-hmm.
I was working a domestic violence hotline during the OJ trial, before people were really
Wow.
talking about things. And,
Precisely.
gender roles were very different. In
Mm-hmm.
my new
Mm-hmm.
book, I talk about all relationships. And what I find
Mm-hmm.
is one, relationships now are so much different in some ways as they were years ago. And in some ways, they're so much
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
same. But for most people, what's healthy is very different than what's normal. And everybody
Mm-hmm.
wants to be normal,
Yes.
but normal for most people isn't healthy. Normal is what you used to. And unless people learn what healthy is, their normal isn't healthy. So they go from one relationship to the other that seem normal. I call it the same person with a different name,
Mm-hmm.
until they learn whatever the lesson is they're supposed to learn and learn how to go from what's normal, what they're used to what's
Wow.
healthy.
I love that. What's normal to what's healthy, because we all grow up differently. We all think that, how we're treated is normal. And that must be for some, a lot of, especially for children or, teenagers young, who's very young, who experience trauma at such a young age. They start to think that this is normal. But, I love that you teach them how to be healthy, because those are two different things. I love that
Well,
you
and
mentioned, go ahead.
go ahead. I was going to say, even for people that don't grow up with trauma, a lot of families don't communicate. They don't know how to
Right.
communicate. So now
Right.
people are in their 20s, 30s having relationships and even older, and they don't know how to communicate with their partner. They don't
Yeah.
know how to, talk. They assume their partner should know because they
Mm-hmm.
love them and it seems so obvious
Mm-hmm.
to them. I
Yes,
find most couples have the same argument over and over
that's
again
true.
because they don't have the conflict resolution skills
Yes,
to
precisely.
deal with conflict in a healthy way.
Precisely. And just even communicating that how much you love a person as well is a challenge to some people. I love that. Like, family communication is such a huge pivotal thing into our personality and to our lives. And if we can't, do that, it really affects your, how you grow up, how your experiences are. I want to talk a little bit about what you said about the 40 years that you had. Is there any particular changes that you've seen that how it was
I've
different
seen
now?
I've seen a lot of changes. One of the things I talk about, I wrote a book in 2020. It came out at the end of 2022 in
Wife
October. In
beater.
2023, I'm so proud. Here, let me just boast. Like, it's
All
the
right.
best, the indie best relationship book for
All
um,
right.
a nonfiction relationship book. And I talk about how relationships in 2023 are so
Mm-hmm.
much different than they
Mm-hmm.
were back in the day, that traditional isn't always healthy and healthy isn't always traditional, and
Wow.
that there are all kinds of relationships that are becoming more and more mainstream, and
Mm-hmm.
sexuality is much more accepted by society. Gay marriage
Mm-hmm.
is legal. There have been
Mm-hmm.
a lot of changes in what's what's considered more normal and mainstream than there were
Mm-hmm.
years ago. Also, when I originally started, especially older couples
Mm-hmm.
that were older than me when I was, young and in the field, traditional relationships, women didn't work. They didn't have a lot of their own money. Marriage vows were, love, honor, and obey, not love, honor, and cherish.
I
So
see.
the options felt more limited.
Yeah,
And now we see a lot more male victims.
that's true. I love that. I love that you highlight that, because violence, domestic violence, isn't just women. It's also men experience the same. And speaking of communication, do you feel like there's been changes in how this is being talked about? Is it being talked about more? Is it being talked about in a more healthier way now than it was before?
I well, I'm going to have a little bit of my own bias. I think right now it's being talked about differently, but it's become, and please don't take this the wrong way. When I say
Sure, no
trendy,
problem.
the term narcissist abuse is everywhere. You're not
Wow.
you can't be an ass anymore. Now
Mm-hmm,
if you do something that's not nice, all of a sudden you're a narcissist, and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
somebody's in a relationship with a narcissist. A
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
narcissistic personality disorder is a very big deal. And somebody can be a jerk or an ass, and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily mean that they're a bad or a good relationship that runs its course and gets nasty, and somebody says something nasty. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, because people see on social media all these posts about narcissist abuse,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it really is an awareness and they are in a mentally or emotionally abusive relationship. So there
Mm-hmm.
is awareness. But I think people are so quick to blame their partner about being a narcissist and not looking at, their own part in, what's going on. And sometimes people are just jerks. It isn't always narcissist abuse.
I love that it's because it's trendy. Like you said that because the nature of social media now is like it's while it's being talked about more, it's being talked in a way that isn't always right, isn't always healthy. Do you feel like there's anything that we can do, individually? How should we be approaching this when we talk about it online?
Well, I think one, you need to look at who's saying it. A lot of the posts, especially, a lot of the younger posts, you see from people that have been in a bad relationship, maybe an
Mm-hmm.
abusive relationship, maybe
Mm-hmm.
their partner cheated, and
Mm-hmm.
now they're an expert in narcissist abuse, and they're posting over and over again. I think you really want to look at who's making these posts and what they're saying. The thing about
Mm-hmm.
social media is you don't need credentials to be an expert. You can be a
Mm-hmm.
coach, you can be an expert, you can be anything you want to be, and all you have to do is put that title on there, and you don't need
Mm-hmm.
anything to back it up. One bad relationship for 2 weeks, now all of a sudden, you're an expert. Now that's not true for everybody, but there is a lot of that on there. I pay a lot of attention to who's posting what, and I've seen a good amount of that on there.
Mm-hmm. Um, Dr. Laura, I want to start getting into your book now that you've mentioned like looking at how people talk about this online or not online, and how you say that it has, how the conversation has changed. And by the way, for the audience and listeners, the title of Dr. Laura's book is How to Have a Healthy Relationship in an Unhealthy World. Um, I'd like to point that part out. What is this unhealthy world, Miss Dr. Laura?
Well,
What would you describe?
originally I wrote the book because I work with so many men and women whose normal isn't healthy. And you talk
Mm,
about, the relationship and the dynamics that are unhealthy and helping them process the pain. And then people will, to say to me, Laura, I know about I know about unhealthy relationships. I know about abusive relationships. I've spent my whole life in one. What I don't know is how to have a healthy relationship.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A lot of us either become our parents or we marry our parents because that's what healthy looks like.
Wow. What a way to
And
put that.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I no, I that's what normal looks like. A little
Yes,
not
yes.
so Freudian slip. It's not healthy,
Mm-hmm,
but it's normal and it feels comfortable. It's what we
mm-hmm,
know. And
mm-hmm.
so the thing about toxic relationships is, they look like the fairy tale. The highs are so high, but then
Yes.
the lows are so low. In a
Mm-hmm,
healthy relationship, I always say an unhealthy relationship is more like, a roller coaster. The highs are so high, but then when it gets bad, the lows are so low. And for some people, the highs are almost worth the lows in the beginning,
mm-hmm,
and then not so
mm-hmm,
much. But in a healthy relationships, it's more of a merry-go-round. It goes up and down, but not so extreme. And for
mm-hmm.
some people, it takes some getting used to, because they think they're boring because they're not getting those high highs. Almost like an addictive high. And
Precisely.
learning the difference between what's healthy and what's normal.
I love that. Everyone needs a copy of that book, Dr. Laura. No wonder it won an award for Indie Best Award for Nonfiction.
and it also talks about now, there are relationships like uh, polygamy and BDSM and, May December, multiracial relationships.
Hmm.
All of those are very healthy, normal relationships
Yes.
as long
Yes.
as both people are over 18, they're of adult consenting,
Hmm. Hmm.
age, and they're
Hmm.
giving free will consent. And it's important to remember that cooperation, doing something because you're afraid of the consequences if you don't do it, is
Hmm.
not free will consent. Free will
Right.
consent means that it's what you want to do. And whatever that looks like, the rules have really changed in relationships. And
Hmm.
whatever
Hmm.
they are is okay, as
Wow.
long as it's consensual,
As long as it's consensual, as long as it's surrounded by love,
by
affection,
love.
and care.
And then in the book, I go into, the effect of technology on relationships, social media on
Oh,
relationships,
please.
porn and relationships,
Hmm.
having a baby. I always,
Hmm.
and, I talk about how you have to have a healthy me before you can have a healthy we. And there
I
are
love that.
exercises throughout the book. The book probably would take an hour and a half to read. It's short. There's little stories. Nobody wants to sit and read War and Peace anymore. Everything's quick. Unfortunately, excuse me, it's not on Audible at the moment,
Hmm.
but it is on Amazon and downloadable on Kindle, paperback, and hardcover.
That's fantastic. I just want to highlight that one real quick. I need to have a healthy me before we have a healthy we. It's like I've had this conversation recently with a friend who wanted to make sure he gets into therapy first before they have kids because we need to heal our inner child, so to speak, so we don't bleed that into our children.
Well,
And go
you
ahead.
can tell him he can read the last chapter, because the last chapter is when you go from me to we to three. It's about
Wow.
having a baby changes a relationship.
Okay, that's fantastic. I will definitely recommend that to my friend, and I of course recommend that to all our listeners and our audiences as well. Dr.
Can I show
Laura,
a cover? This is a
go
cover
ahead.
of the book. How to
Ah,
have a
there you
healthy
go.
relationship in an unhealthy world.
In an unhealthy world. Everybody grab your copy. It's over on, where can we find it, Dr. Laura? On
It's on
Amazon?
Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
It's on Barnes and Noble
Fantastic.
too.
Oh, that's great. That's great. It's it's really, you're really hitting all the points that everyone needs to start talking about these things. And yeah, like I think it's a responsible thing to do to, figure out what inner traumas you have. It would be responsible to do that so you don't bleed that over onto the children that you are going to bring into this world. Dr. Laura, we're nearing the end of this, but I would like, of course, as much as I want to keep you in a little bit more for our audiences, I always like to end it this way, and I always like to ask, what is the future? What are the future aspirations of Dr. Laura Streffler? How do you see the future of mental health advocacy moving forward? And what future developments do you hope to see in that field, particularly in domestic violence and abuse?
Well, let me start with, mental health. I always say, the soul would have no rainbow if the eyes had no tears. And if there's a beautiful thing that came out of COVID, is that it normalized mental health, and that it's health.
Wow.
It's not mental illness, it's health. And without mental
Health.
health, there's no
Mm-hmm.
health.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
your generation and generations to follow, and even
Mm-hmm.
even older generations. I'm seeing a lot of older people that have never been in therapy before that are
Mm-hmm.
really normalizing, and that, it's not just for crazy people. It never
Mm-hmm.
was, but the perception was that only crazy people went to therapy. And the
Right.
truth is, therapy is to help healthy people live healthier lives.
Wow.
To be able to talk about things, get tools. I call it vomiting. Sometimes, even if you haven't had trauma and you're just on overload, just to be able to vomit and get all that stuff that you're holding in out in a safe, non judgmental environment. And I think in the future, more and more people are going to be okay doing that because society is normalizing
Wow.
therapy, which I think is the most beautiful thing. As far as, with victims of domestic violence, one of the other big terms on social media right now is gaslighting, which, by the
Yep.
way, comes
Hmm.
from a movie from 1946 called
Okay.
Gaslight with Lana Turner and, oh, I'm having a brain freeze. I think it's Charles Boyer. Sorry, a little brain freeze here. It's a great movie. It's in black and white. It's on YouTube if you can't find it anywhere else. Um, but and we used to call it crazy making, and it's also called gaslighting. It's playing head
Hmm.
games and making your partner think that you're crazy. And
Hmm.
traditionally, victims were afraid to go to therapy because they believed that they were crazy, and
Hmm.
that a therapist would just confirm or find out that they're crazy. And I can tell you, going to therapy doesn't make you crazy. And if you're afraid of being crazy, then you're not crazy, because people that really are out of touch with reality don't think they're crazy. They just think you don't get it. So if you're worried about being crazy, if you think you're crazy, chances are pretty good that you're pretty sane.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that validation. And yes, it is true. I agree. I hope that the audience feel some even more form of optimism that mental health is being normalized, therapy is being normalized, and thank you for that movie trivia. I didn't know that Gaslight
Yeah.
was the term
Mental
Gaslight
health
was from
is
a movie.
wealth.
Mental
Mental
health is
health
wealth.
is wealth. That's, if you think about, things that are of value, if you think of wealth, wealth has, for a lot of people, wealth has, especially entrepreneurs, wealth has value. But without your physical and mental health, dollars mean nothing.
That is true. That is true. It is probably the most important asset right now to have in today's world, especially in today's world, a post-COVID world where stresses seems to have doubled, you know. And but I love that the optimism, the positive of that is that we are more open and we are more, more welcoming of the mental health. Dr. Laura, I would like to give you this opportunity. Where can we find you? Let us know where we can connect with you. Where can we reach out to you? And tell us a bit more about your book and where can we find it?
Well, like I said, my book is on Amazon. My
Hmm.
website is drlauracounseling.com.
Hmm.
My last name is pretty complicated. It's Streffler. On Instagram, I'm at Laura Streffler,
Hmm.
Streyffeller.
Hmm.
You can find me on Instagram, and feel free to reach out, call, text, email.
Fantastic. Dr. Laura, I'm sure I speak for the audience as well that we are glad to have you here. For the audiences, of course, I invite them all to grab a copy of that book, get connected with Dr. Laura. And Dr. Laura, thank you so much for your time and thank you for gracing
You
us with
are
this
very welcome.
wisdom.
And I will kind of put a little plug right now. I'm working on a workbook to go with the book.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a workbook coming.
all right. Okay. Well, that if that doesn't push everyone else to grab a copy, they should start grabbing a copy now. Tell your friends about it. Tell everyone about it. Tell everyone who values mental health about it. Dr. Laura, thank you for being the voice of this. Thank you being for such a leading, you know, long tenured experienced
It's
figure
been
in
it's
this.
been I feel like, I just want to say, because I mean this with all my heart. There are a lot of stories. They're composites of different relationships and things I've learned from clients. And I feel like one of the ways to honor my clients is to share the things that they've taught me. You talk about me teaching them, but really, I
Mhm.
believe what Mark Twain said. I try to
Mhm.
never allow my schooling to interfere with my education. And my
Wow.
clients over the years have taught me so much.
Mhm.
And if I can give back just a fraction of that, then I can't help but do it.
A life well lived would have been. Dr. Laura, by the way, there's so many you dropped so many gems and quotes that we need to We need to sift through all of that. That was all great. Thank you once again for your
It's
grace
been my pleasure.
and your wisdom. Thank you so much. And to the audiences, we'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.